Hey, everybody, it's another podcast from Angel Dogs, trying to serve the public, do our bit to help those that help all of us, everybody, whether it be building roads, building bridges, working in hospitals, working in schools, law enforcement, first responders, fire departments. You get the picture, military, of course. So, and that be the case, my guest again, number three, and actually we consider this two of a 10-part series because we're trying to educate the public, is John Seaman. Both of us were former DEA. Some of you may have to look that up, agents for over 2 decades. John was a U.S. Marine Corps before that, and NIS. We both did contract work overseas. I did mine in a different arena than John, and John is absolutely all over what's going on in our public and what's going on with our government, and particularly building up to what's probably going to be the most critical thing ever come this way in this country is the presidential election of 2024. I mean, we really are now, from our perspective, are trying to bring people like John to the forefront to educate you, the public, as to open your eyes, look around you, do more than one source of information, do 2, do 10, do whatever you have to do. Don't just listen to your neighbor. All right. Don't listen to the person you work with. Go out there and get your own intel and find out what's going on. Because as we know, even from the Hollywood movie industry, the media is just not what it used to be under Walter Cronkite back in the day. All right. So we covered last week, we covered Benghazi, we covered Fast and Furious, really the government lying, and then that's really no other way to put it. All documented, all open source, right, John?
Correct.
No question about it. That happened there. And there's been many a podcast on, particularly in a movie, on the Benghazi situation, which was just absolutely unbelievable that our people would be denied support. It's just mind-boggling in my career. Anyway, I'm sure John will say the same thing. So tonight we're going to move the ball forward a little bit, just a little bit, and we're going to. John is going to discuss the big lie theory at its root level. Talk about how the Obama administration, the former President Obama, used the media and all the outlets to further the big lie theory, and how the unmasking of Americans, which John will talk about, also brought forward the big lie theory and what we have today, which is a mess. It's a friggin' mess. All right. And it's more than the Donald Trump, hate Trump or love Trump MAGA syndrome. Okay. And I'm not saying I'm there, I'm here, but you decide for yourself. But that's the deal. You decide for yourself. You know, the law is supposed to be equal to everybody, right? Right, John? It's supposed to be equal
correct.
Under the law. I don't give a crap who you are in this here United States. Black, white, Chinese, purple, whatever. Okay. And I never saw it in my career, 34 years, including Baltimore City and Prince George's County. Go figure there, right? They're in the news enough. I never saw it. And I'm sure John would say the same thing when we talked about that beforehand. Anyway, so that's the set for tonight, Mr. John. I apologize. We had a little glitch in the electronics here. But, John, you are on, my friend. Take it away.
Well, thank you, Brian. For the public, this is all about rule of law for us. And one of the things I document in everything I write in my Substacks at the end or in the beginning is, how do we move forward as a nation to restore the rule of law, especially when you've got all the weaponization going on, all the violations of the law going on in front of you. So that's really the main question and the main thrust of this whole thing. So you, the public, is aware. How do we get back to normal? Because right now we're living under an illusion that we have a justice system that works for everybody. And as you can see, we have a 2-tier justice system. It works for the people in power who are violating the law, and the ones who aren't violating the law are the ones being chased and after using the law. And so we're kind of in this dichotomy. So for the American public, only you can answer that question. Do you want rule of law or do you want tyranny and freedom? And that's an issue you're going to have to decide in 2024. The purpose of these podcast is to make you aware of how the Russia collusion hoax was put together, invented by using tidbits of information, given the appearance that somebody did something wrong when nobody did anything wrong. Basically, the people in charge creating the crime to make you believe that somebody has violated the law, which is far from the truth. So let me get into tonight's episode. I'm going to cover unmaskings. And unmaskings is really important because it sets the stage on how the Obama administration weaponized the tools of the National Security Agency to do what? To spy on American citizens, given the rouge that they were protecting Americans from outside foreign sources. So that is one of the main issues I'm going to cover tonight. And it's an important part because when you understand how the unmasking came about and how they used it, then you'll understand when we get into the conspiracy itself and bring in all the parties involved, then you'll understand how this tool, the NSA tool, comes into play. We call it in a conspiracy and over a mode operandi, one of the means of how did they do what they did. Well, their first means to be able to do that, I discussed last week on how they reorganized the National Security Division. That was part of it. Now, how they use the National Security Agency tool of unmaskings to spy on Americans.
Hey, John, let me interrupt on that just for edification for the audience.
Yeah.
We don't have to do a treatise. Can you just describe for the public, if you would, please, the term unmasking? Like they think it's like an undercover operative that gets exposed. Or
well, my understanding, my understanding is the NSA records just about every conversation in the world or intercepts, and they warehouse them. I think way back in around the late 2000s, they were talking about building these huge warehouses in Utah that the NSA would need all this storage capacity. And that's basically what it was for, because they're collecting all this data throughout the world and they're warehousing it. Okay. So if you make a phone call, Brian makes a phone call to me or whatever, that's captured and it's warehoused. So it allows the investigative agency under unmasking to go back if they've got a target to find out who did that target talk to. Basically, it's supposed to be on foreign counterparts contacting for nefarious purposes.
That's what I wanted you to point out.
But the problem is they've been using the rouge of Americans being, intercepted or talking to foreign counterparts, and then using the rouge that it's part of that foreign counterintelligence program against our adversaries. And that's far from the truth on all these unmaskings. And that's one of the examples I'm going to get to tonight as we get into unmasking. So let me start here and in the beginning. When Obama got elected in 2011, he did an executive order that loosened the surveillance minimization procedures, lowering the bar of the communications of American citizens who were inadvertently swept up in foreign intel surveillance. So if you've got an American talking to a foreigner overseas, they don't know if it's a spy or whatever. Well, they're intercepting all that traffic. And so he lowered the tools to allow and expand the investigative agencies to collect, warehouse, and then go back. If they identify a foreign counterpart and they talk to an American, they can go back and look at who the American talked to and then trace going that direction and vice versa. That's the importance of it. It's kind of like for the public, it's kind of like a connecting the dot tool of communications to show the pattern of who spoke to who, when, where, and from that standpoint. And it's setting the timeline of when all the communications started.
John, I have a question myself, and hopefully maybe for the audience. Are you familiar with the Snowden caper?
Yes, I am.
Wasn't that was under the Obama administration, wasn't it?
That was where Snowden discovered that the NSA, all the collection tools they were used, they could break into any computer system and communication devices in the world. And he's the one that disclosed that, because what he disclosed was that the same thing. They were misusing the tools to spy on you, the citizens, under the rouge that they were using it under the Patriot Act, under foreign intelligence.
Yes, that's what I thought.
So here's where when you start asking the question, how does the FBI, your CIA, your intelligence community, all these people involved in the collection of this information, foreign counterintelligence, how do they go off the rails? Well, this is a great example of how we get off the rails here. Because you have, as I said, 2011, President Obama did an executive order. He loosened up the tools, which made it easier for the agencies to use the unmasking tools. Okay. It allowed his administration to exploit those tools to do what? Spy on Americans. Okay. In violation of court ordered surveillance procedures. The problem we have today is you have the procedure. It's just like the IGs. You have all the checks and balances in the system. You have the same thing in the FISA courts. You have the checks and balances in the system. What's happened now is the agency just ignore the checks and they ignore the law. Bottom line.
Audience, I have to check my guest. John, you have to explain FISA. You have to
FISA is the foreign
FISA
the FISA court. It's the court that approves warrants on American citizens, on overseas foreign adversaries, that sort of thing. So they have these special courts because they're sensitive, because you've got the collection elements and everything else, and nobody wants to disclose methods and means. So they set up the FISA court to be the checks and balances of the Patriot Act system. Okay, that was one of the key parts of the whole FISA system.
And the FISA court proceedings are secretive. I mean,
they are secretive. Yes, that is correct. Those are secretive.
So the audience, you watch any newscast and you see John and the audience, you see the journalist who can be talking about the Barbie movie one second and then the FISA court the next, and they're just throwing it out. So I just want to make sure our audience understands, if they heard the term, we don't just gloss over it, and they understand that that's not open to the public.
No, that's not.
Okay.
That's not open to the public. So when you look at when he loosened up all the guidelines, okay, from the years 2011 all the way up to he left office, you've got documented cases, and the public can look this up themselves, where you had James Clapper testify before Congress, and they asked him, I believe, is the intel community spying on Americans? And he said, not wittingly or unwittingly. Okay. Well, they were spying on America. They've got documented cases. I believe that the House Oversight Committee ended up doing investigations, classified investigations on who did what, when, and where. And they did spy on senators and that. There's also a big case that came out, I believe, in around the mid 2000 period on the Israelis, where they spied on the president of Israel, Netanyahu, because at the time you had Obama and them negotiating secretly with Iran, and they wanted to know where the Israelis stood. The problem being, in that case, they also intercepted the Israeli American citizens in the United States and were listening in on their conversations. But worse, they were leaking that information to the press on those conversations to downplay for political purposes, to cause Netanyahu problems in Israel, and also the people here that were American citizens on their concerns, Israelis, to stop the opposition. So basically to suppress that information. Now that came out, and I believe the ABC and some of the major networks tried to downplay that, and they downplayed it, saying very simple, that spying on other countries, presidents, and that's kind of like a normal thing. It's an unwritten rule. They do it, we do it, whatever. So they kind of poo-pooed that. But that wasn't the point. The point was is they were using it, the rouge, that they were trying to protect the foreign counterpart side, when actually they were using it to suppress the opposition here in the United States to Obama's Iranian deal. So that's really what the suppression was all about. And they did it by spying on what? American citizens. Okay, which is, under the rules and guidelines, is a violation of your Fourth Amendment right on the thing. So let me get into the unmasking of General Flynn, and I'll walk through the tone here. On November 10th, 2016, Trump gets elected, and he warns Trump against hiring Lieutenant General Flynn. You got to go, why? I mean, the guy was Obama's former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, well qualified and intelligent, had a stellar record in Iraq for revamping the intelligence information in Iraq. And if it wasn't for General Flynn, a lot of those major targets in Iraq wouldn't have been captured or killed on a deal. But he was so guru of revamping the intel system. So he was a great choice to come in. However, he resigned in 2014, I believe, over disagreement with President Obama off the information that they seized from Osama bin Laden's location. And I don't want to put words in General Flynn's mouth because he can speak for himself. But the information that was reported was he had a disagreement that some of that information tied right back into the Iranians assisting Osama on some of his stuff. And Flynn was dead set against the Iranian deal. So hence, Flynn resigns, leaves in 2014. Then the information comes in that the head of the CIA at the time, Brennan, opens up a counterintelligence case after he leaves. Well, you got to ask why. Right. The guy's the head of an agency. So just throw that out there for the public. Yet I'm a criminal investigator. You want to put all the dots and pieces together to figure out, why are these people doing this? Or is there a reason to violate the law? Is there a reason to do this? What's the end game here? And that's what I'm trying to paint here on the unmasking. It's a great example to show how they use this tool for political purposes.
And John, so we're talking for Flynn, we're talking 2014 thereabouts, correct?
Well, 2014 is when I believe he resigned.
He resigned.
And then I believe they started looking at him heavily in 2015.
Okay, so hold right there. So my point is, Trump was nowhere in the picture.
No,
he was nowhere in the picture. So audience, there's a game plan here. There's a game plan going forward. I mean, who else? The Democrats? Okay, there's a game plan going forward against all of us, the public, and what they're trying to get to. Now, we're eventually going to build on that, but I'm just saying, I want to make sure we get that point out. There's no MAGA in 2015. There's no MAGA in 2014. Trump was on he was on some show. You just got fired, whatever the hell that was. He's on some local cable show.
Well, to explain it to the public, it's real easy. There was animosity between General Flynn and President Obama. And that's been documented widely. So that's not a secret. Okay. So the next thing that happens in November, and I don't know the date, there was a discussion inside the National Security Council with Ben Rhodes and FBI Baker over the massive unmaskings that were occurring. And the source of that was the FISA quarterly updated book by DOJ and the FBI to the White House, which showed a tremendous amount of unmaskings during this, going way back to the 2012 up to the 2016 standpoint. So you had all this unmasking documented in the system. So you have, for the public here, you have these records, whether they're classified or whatever, they are documented to show that somebody inside the system requested an unmasking. Either they queried the system for a name check, or they got in and pulled the conversations and listened to them, but they violated the system without going through the legal procedures.
John, if they did the latter part, pulled the conversation, whoever they is, and listened to it, an intel analyst or an operative, whatever, is that on whose authority?
Well, that's the whole question. That's where we're going to go with this thing.
Okay,
So you have this discussion in 216.
Mhm.
So if I'm a criminal investigator, and if we ever get a real Russian hoax conspiracy investigation, this is be one of the things I would want to subpoena. I would want to get copies of what was discussed in that meeting, who said what, when, and how, and start honing in on this unmasking information. Because if this was this whole pattern that started, okay, so you've got unmasking. You already know that Clapper testified and lied before Congress on the unmasking by the IA or the IC community on the deal. You know that they spied on the Israeli government and also American citizens of Jewish descent in the United States. So those are all documented cases of spying on American citizens for political. And Flynn's case is really the great example of the case, because on I think November 18th, the New York Times put out a commentary after Obama went to Trump and asked him not to hire Flynn. They came out, I believe the New York Times came out with a commentary talking about, is Flynn the right choice? And bringing up, does he have ties to Russia? So they already started, as you can see, media leaking stories, putting out that narrative that Flynn's got problems. Now, this is before Flynn's even taken a step or his oath of office as the National Security Advisor. Now, prior to that, in November, okay, they unmasked, they start unmasking Samantha Powers. That's the first one, I believe, in November 10th of 2016. Then you had December the 12th, you had Powers again with Clapper. Then you had on the 6th of December, you had the deputy chief of mission, this Kelly Dupis, and the U.S. ambassador to Italy, this John Phillips, unmasking on the 6th. Then you had the December 7th, you had Powers again unmasking. These are all Flynn they're unmasking. Then you have on the 14th, you had Powers again, Brennan. And then you have a whole field of Treasury people on the unmasking on December 14th. Why is that important? Okay, I'm going to break this a little bit and go into the Treasury Department.
Okay.
In August of 2016, a whistleblower notified the acting inspector general for the Treasury Department. His name was Richard Delamar, and she filed a complaint. However, the complaint got rejected because they said, the inspector general said it didn't meet the requirements. Now take a step back there for a second. So let's bring us up to the Veneman or the IG complaint from the intelligence community that they filed on Trump that was used in his first impeachment. Well, the whistleblower was secondhand. They don't allow secondhand information to be filed in as the original complaint. However, that inspector general of the IG community used that information, the secondhand, to let it go forward. And that's how you end up getting into the impeachment trial that leads to Trump's first impeachment. Now, back forward to here. Now you have an initial whistleblower complaint. The whistleblower is a person within the intelligence community that was on an assignment and sent over to the Treasury Department to their Office of Information Analysis, okay? She files another complaint on March 2017 with the same inspector general acting that, and her accusation is that the Obama Treasury Department regularly surveilled Lieutenant General Flynn financial records from December 2015 into 2017. This was reported in the media only by one newspaper called the Ohio Star in May 18 of 2020 by this guy, Neil McCabe. The title of the article was "The Treasury Department Spied on Flynn, Manafort, and Trump Family," says Whistleblower.
Where was that? Where was that paper, John?
That was in Ohio, the Ohio Star, May 18, 2020.
Do we? I mean, where? I'm not familiar. Is that near what? Cleveland, or what are we talking?
That I have no idea.
Okay, good.
Where that's from. So what's the whistleblower's claim in her complaint?
Mhm.
She says that she saw this information and she took her colleague, one of the people working with her, and they were on assignment, as I said, from the intel community to the office of the Treasury office of OIA. They saw all these documents on the surveillance of Flynn, and they came to the conclusion that none of this was tied to any legitimate criminal or national security concerns. So that's what concerned her and her friend, who are intel analysts, that saw this information. So they saw that the program that the Treasury Department was operating under this OIA was targeting U.S. citizens, and they said there was tons of other names, members of Congress, senior staffers on Trump's transition team, members of Trump's family. And so the only information they put in their IG complaint was on Manafort and Flynn, because the other stuff they said was classified under classified information on the thing.
So these individuals were labeled the whistleblowers.
They were labeled the whistleblowers.
Okay.
She files a third attempt because she's frustrated in May of 2017. Again, stating that the surveillance program was run out of the Office of Intelligence Analyst under the leadership of this Leslie Ireland, who came to the office of OIA in 2010 from the CIA and who did a one-year stint as Obama's daily briefer.
Oh, wow.
So now you get the feel here. You've got the Treasury Department OIG, or I mean the Inspector General, that has a complaint that the Treasury Department is running a surveillance program and they're violating the law. And that's basically what she's saying, that they're spying on American citizens. Nothing happens to that complaint, by the way.
Doesn't go anywhere.
Doesn't go anywhere. Nobody knows.
Anything happened? Anything happened to the whistleblower?
No, nothing that I know of.
Do
That was the end of the. It's kind of like it disappeared into outer space.
John, do we know anything about them? Do you have any background information on the analyst at all?
No, just the information that was reported in that media report. And I believe if you bring it up, you can get I think there's an OIG or a Treasury IG report on it somewhere in the system, but they never followed up. Again, just like everything else that you're seeing. Why no investigation? If it was on Trump, they'd move mountains and hills.
Oh, absolutely.
But when it's on Obama and them, it's kind of like we're seeing on Biden. Well, hey, it's just business as usual.
Not only that, John, but I'm sure you're going to comment on it, but for the audience, the pattern we should be looking back at, and now we know it's in blatant open disregard, blatant open. Just, like when the mob would go in New York City, which I work organized crime in New York City, and in drug enforcement, and you're going to go and you drink where the cops and the agents drink. You're right there. Now it's just blatant. It's just blatant.
That is correct.
That's
correct.
Then it sounds to me like that report. Now I have not seen that article. I want to see that myself. But That's interesting that it just vaporized. Right?
Yeah. Well, the question you got to ask, Brian, is it's in violation of the law. You've got an intel collection agency within the Treasury Department. If it's true that they've been collecting information from 215 to 217 on General Flynn. Now, Flynn, the question you got to ask everybody in the public, Flynn hasn't taken the office yet. He hasn't been sworn in as the National Security Advisor. All these unmasking requests that I'm reading to you here were made in this November-December timeframe. So you have to kind of put it in that frame of mind. Why are they using the system to query the new National Security Advisor? For what purpose? What is the purpose? He's not violating the law, talking to any foreign counterparts, selling the country out. He's not. See what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
There's a major issue here on this.
And I'm going to comment, and this is kudos to you, John. The public, and I'm talking to the John Q public, who's not worked in the government, not been federal level investigators or any type of investigators for that matter. Okay. Something is obviously, there's a plan. There's a massive plan about to unfold during this time, or has been being built, and now it's coming. So it's almost like this report vaporized to the IG, right? It just went away. So
yeah,
they're throwing a little dart out there, and nobody reacts. And to my fellow Americans, oh, there's a saying you haven't heard in a while, right? To my fellow Americans, wow, I'm sorry if I offended anybody. Okay, go listen to that country western song, whatever the hell the name of it is, Small Town, I guess. To my fellow Americans, you know, I realize that all of us are making a living doing this, doing that, whatever, but this is our responsibility, like John's pointing out. And specifically in the next year, read, listen, you have more access to information than you ever have had, ever before you at your fingertips. I'm sorry, John. I got off again a little bit.
Oh, no. It's
my patriotic, you know what? I'm no angel, man. That's why I say angel dog, okay? But listen, when I served, and I do still in some degree, and you did too, John. And you still are.
That's why it's important. I want the public to realize here you had, and I'll name the Treasury people. You had this on December 14th, 2016. Flynn's under no investigations, no crime, no nothing. And here you have an unmasking request by who? Samantha Powers. And she did it twice, Director Brennan. And then you had Director Mike Newfield, Deputy Secretary of the Treasury, Sarah Rankin, Undersecretary of the Treasury. Then you had this Nation Sheets, Acting Undersecretary. And then you had this Adam, I can't pronounce his last name, but you have another person. I surely can. So you have 4 Treasury officials, high ranking, unmasking General Flynn in December. Why? So you take that information. This is how you put a case together, ladies and gentlemen. Right. You've got connecting the dots. You have a whistleblower complaint in August of 2016 accusing the Treasury Department and the Obama administration of using the tools of unmasking for political purposes against Team Trump and other American officials. Now you've got the situation where Flynn gets appointed as National Security Advisor. You had the President of the United States go to the incoming to tell him don't hire Flynn. So you got to ask the question, why? Why would a former president ask the incoming president not to hire his choice for National Security Advisor? It certainly can't be for qualification issues, as Flynn was Obama's head person for the Defense Intelligence Agency. You know, it's right out of the friggin' Roman history, Brutus. Right? And what was the movie of fact fiction? I would get those mixed up. Fiction. The Gladiator. The warrior takes his countrymen to war. He's a hero. All he wants to do is go home and farm.
and they turn on them. You know,
Exactly.
John, these people that, and you both of us know, we have been in places, I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I wish I could say it. I have been in places where people have no name tags. Some of you all in the special ops community know what I'm talking about. And you become a whistleblower and you making a statement like these people did about what they're seeing before them, you are putting it all on the line. You are putting it all on the line. And was Uber around then? Yeah, I guess it was. You better have another trade or a skill. Or today, of course, I'm fast forwarding, John. I don't want to cut you off. But today you're going to prison. And they can, go ahead.
Well,
now
the public sees how they use an unmasking. And General Flynn's the example. Hasn't violated any laws. He's being appointed as a national security advisor. And yet you've got all these unmaskings. The other people that unmasked from that point on, you've got Samantha Powers again. Remember, she's the U.S. ambassador to the UN.
Incredible.
Then you have the 28th. You have the director of, again, Clapper. Then you have the ambassador of Turkey involved. Okay. Then on January 5th, you have Dennis McDonough, the chief of staff for President Obama, do the unmasking on Flynn. Then on the 7th, you have Clapper. You have this guy, Michael Dempsey, he's the director of national intelligence for integration. And then you have the principal deputy director, Stephanie O'Sullivan, on January the 7th. They unmasked Flynn. Then on the 11th, you have again Powers again. And then the final one on the 12th, the vice president of the United States, Joe Biden, unmasking General Flynn. So you can't make this stuff up.
And John, if I may ask, and I don't mean to put you on the spot on this, might be a stat we don't know. I don't know it, and I don't know if you know it. Do we know during this period, right where you're talking about, where was the media? Do we have any stats on what, how they show a story on Fox News gets 90% views and on CNN it gets like -1? Do we have any stats on any of that in the media?
Well, Brian, that's when we get into the media part of this thing.
Go ahead.
That I will cover that because I need to cover them separately, because if I put them together, it may confuse some of the public. But I can tell the public this: when you timeline it out and you see the media stories that were leaked by the people within the IC and the FBI during these timeframes on the people that they're making these false accusations against, all the dots connect. That's why I say the Russian hoax case, I have to say this, from a conspiracy case, the evidence is all available. Documentary, financial, text, all the supporting documents there. All that has to happen is you have to have a competent team of prosecutors and investigators to do what? Talk to and start flipping people that were the conspirators, just like they did on Watergate when they got John Dean to talk about the president, and which led to the indictment of the attorney general. So that's how you take this thing apart. But unless you have, that's why I say in all my Substacks, how do we as a country move forward if we don't hold anybody accountable for the crime of the century, the Russian hoax conspiracy? Okay. And that's why this is important, because you got to look at it and start from the beginning, the origins, and start slowly building how this all comes together. As I say, it doesn't happen by happenstance. Okay. And it's not, just coincidence. There is no coincidence.
As both federal investigators, and again, I'm showing my lack of here. If somebody in 2024, 25 goes back to investigate this, what would be our statute of limitation?
Well, the statute is real simple. You have the 2016 agreement with Hillary, the DNC, to do what? To taint Trump with Russian collusion.
Got it.
Okay, so and Durham has laid out the conspiratorial agreement in his indictment of Sussman and his findings. He lays out that agreement, and he implicates Obama and Biden because what? They were vice president, president. They knew about the plan of Hillary. And what did they do? They participated. They were co-conspirators. They allowed it to go forward. As we discussed in the last segment, when does a case agent on a case say the president wants to know? So those are all the questions you need to revert on this thing as they go after Trump. Is you got to look at Obama. What did he know? When did he know it? Very simple. All his actions on this. Okay. And you have to look on how the Rouge was first started. Remember, I think I covered this on that first hour and a half we did on the first one. In 2000, I can frame this pretty simple. You have the agreement in July. The Russians intercept the conversation. They tell Brennan. Brennan tells Obama. They're all panicking. What do? They should have stopped it right there. No, they continued on with the big lie. And now you've got the situation where they actually took the information and manufactured a crime with the Alpha Bank situation on its own. And we're going to cover that later on in other broadcasts. So I'm just giving that tidbit out. However, Russia, right, folks? That's what they all want you to know. Well, ask yourself this. Why would President Obama in March of 2016 get rid of the CIA unit that had been set up since 1984 to counter Russian disinformation and involvement in U.S. elections? Because he disbanded the unit back in March of 2016. That is documented. Then in August, the intel community came to President Obama and said, the Russians you've got all these bots and everything going on all these platforms. They asked, we need to counter some of this. And he said, stand down, don't do anything. Why? If the Russians were the threat, why would you not do anything to counter the threat? Common sense here. So I'm just looking at, from my preview of this as a criminal investigator, you've got the agreement. So you build from the origins of the agreement and you build your case out. And the nice part about a conspiracy is, what was the purpose of conspiracy? The goal: destroy Trump, interfere in the 2016 election, and then you walk it all the way to current time frame, interfere in the 2020 election, and now we're interfering in the 2024 elections.
And I know, John, go ahead. I just
all
want to throw in,
come together.
I want to throw in something like with Flynn, some of this prior to, just think, and I know you know this, but for the audience, at that time, the Democrat Party did not know Trump was going to be president. They did not realize, they thought that Ms. Hillary was going all the way to the goal line.
Oh, nobody thought Trump was going to be
president.
No. They wanted to make sure that he was never going to be president. So it was kind of like, I kind of put it in the standpoint that they saw the numbers of Hillary's problem. People didn't like her as a candidate, number one. And they knew that she had lied to the country by destroying her emails and got treated differently. So you had that. And in order to overcome that, what did they do? They did the Russia situation. And that's really when you look at this thing. And to me, this is not a complicated conspiracy case. It really isn't. Not when all the information matches up. Like I said, when we end this series on number 10, I'm going to cover the 5 W's and the how questions, kind of like a mini pros memo, and we'll go down the list so the public will understand to answer all those questions. And if a criminal investigator can answer the 5 W's and the how question, then you've got a case that potentially can be prosecuted based on the information. The only problem in this case, Brian, is that it has to be investigated. Durham didn't investigate it. He admitted so much. He didn't do a conspiracy. So in order to actually do this case, the next president is going to have to get an AG, and the public's going to have to demand accountability. But I would think the public would want accountability at this point. People have got to be tired of watching a two-tiered system of people, from your attorney general lying to the Congress, your FBI director, FBI lying to the country that they're not violating your Fourth Amendment rights when they are on FISA, all the unmasking, all this stuff, going after American citizens on school systems, and all for political gain.
Well,
For the-
John,
for-
in my humble opinion, and we've talked about this off camera, is that, and I'm going to quote former Delta Force Master Sergeant Pat Mack. Pat Mack, you're out there? Give us a call. Look us up. Is that he says that 50% of the U.S. is just tuned out. They're just tuned.
That's true, and that's why we're going to get into
completely tuned out, John.
Yeah, in the next 5 minutes,
Yeah.
I'm going to wrap this up on unmasking so the public can understand on the legality of the unmasking.
Go ahead.
If back in April 5th, 2000 or March, excuse me, at 2016, the DOJ discovered they were doing an audit on some of their stuff, and they found that they were doing all these unmaskings, okay, in violation of the Fourth Amendment. So they brought it to the attention of Rogers. Rogers orders an audit. Audit gets done. They find out tons of unmasking violations under the Fourth Amendment. Roger goes and testifies before Congress on April 5th, 2016. That same day, he testifies about that the FBI has this unit within the NSA that is collecting all this information on behalf of the FBI, and they took the information outside the walls of the NSA. This is a contracting unit. To this day,
contractors, you saying contractors?
Contractors, yeah,
Government
working
contractors.
for the FBI.
Gotcha.
Contractors working for the FBI.
Got it.
In this audit, they find had taken a ton of a wealth of information out of the NSA with them, working on behalf of the FBI.
Got it.
Nobody knows who these people are,
Who they are.
where they went.
Let me throw something in real quick, John. For those of you, again, you hear this a lot. Back in my dad was in the U.S. Navy. Back in the day, it was called double dipping. You come out of the service and then you work back for the government. It's called double dip. Okay. Today, it's called contractors. And myself and John, we were contractors. We did contract work, correct, John?
That's correct.
So a lot of these contractors are specialists that did 20, 30, 25 years in various agencies. Now they come back into the system and they're working back for the government. And whoever that corporate gets the contract to the government, that's one of the reasons. That's one of the problems right there. And they're big name companies. I'm not going to name them here. We both know them. But they don't get exposed at all. So all the way down to the contract investigators, nobody ever gets exposed on that. Go ahead.
Well, this is why the public.
God, terrible.
Yeah, well, this is why the public needs to know this.
Yeah. The
Congress needs to do something here. The media needs to start asking questions here on behalf. Who are these people? Hold up. This is all open source information. You can look up the investigation. You can look up the findings. Who are these people? Where's the information today? Where's that unit at? Is it still working on behalf of the FBI? Are they one of these subterranean groups here involved in the suppression and censorship of information? Who knows? But they took a tremendous amount of classified information outside of the NSA. And to me, that's a national security problem. And from my standpoint as an American citizen, I want to know who are these people and what are they doing on the thing. The best part is Roger shuts down in October of 2016, the FBI, all the unmasking part right then and there in 2016. In October 26th, the FISA court rules and puts out at a hearing that all those unmaskings they had failed. They had violated people's Fourth Amendment rights. Bottom line, they violated the law. What the public needs to know is nobody went to jail. Why? Either it's a violation of the law. It's not this nonsense that it's a violation of procedures or that is nonsense. If they use this information to access an American citizen using the foreign tools of foreign counterintelligence to spy on Americans, your Fourth Amendment, I'm sorry to say that's a crime. I would throw that out to all these left-wing lawyers out there, all these law schools. If they think that's not a problem, then we have a major problem. Fourth Amendment means nothing. And that's what I'm trying to get out is this is a Fourth Amendment violation. This is what should be discussed. And it should have been discussed in front of the public. Lawyers should be discussing this, DOJ, who did what, when, and where, because people violated the law on this. The best example, I'm going to close out here on the unmasking. Let's take Susan Powers, who turns out to have unmasked hundreds of people when she was the UN ambassador. She testified on July 25th, 2017, that to the House Oversight and Government Reforms Committee on the unmasking of Americans and non-citizens caught up in these unmaskings. She said the majority, all the names were done under her name, but she didn't request them. Now think about that.
The unmaskings?
Yeah, the unmasking. They used her name to unmask all these people using her name. That's all, just using her name. And she didn't know about it.
She didn't know about it.
Yeah. And she doesn't, she has no role in intelligent collection or regular intelligence gathering. So there'd be no reason for her to make any request on anybody in that situation.
Wow.
So when you look at the list of all the people that unmasked General Flynn before he took office, okay, the ambassador of Italy. Well, why would the ambassador of Italy have to be in the know about General Flynn? Well, you have to remember in March of 2016 is when Masood and the entrapment operation started on who? Papadopoulos. The first meetings, and they go into April. So now you can kind of connect the dots and saying, well, why is that person on it? Then you have to look at and say on the why the Italian, where did they say the investigation started from? The FBI. The FBI stated it was from an agent in Rome. Okay, got information from the ambassador to Australia that met Papadopoulos in a bar. And so that's where your starting point of this thing goes. And he was out of the Italian office, okay, out of Italy, I believe out of Milan or Rome, one of those two offices from there. And he reports it to New York, but it goes straight to their headquarters. Well, and then you go from there, and that's where you start looking at all the FBI crazy, what they're doing and what they're not doing at the time. And during that time frame, the public needs to be aware you had Comey and them doing what? Getting ready to exonerate Hillary Clinton of any criminality of what she did by having classified information from an unclassed system in her house. So I mean, you cannot make this stuff up.
You can't.
From the standpoint. And I'll just throw this out. That is why the two IRS agents that just testified before the Oversight Committee were so powerful, because they're the case agents. They know agents are the ones that gather the facts, that see if the facts match the elements of a crime, present it to a U.S. attorney, discuss it with them. They're the ones that direct the case on how to put the case together. The U.S. attorneys there are advisory roles for the law to make sure that they meet the sufficiency requirement. But as far as an investigative role, that's the case. There's nobody that knows more about a case than the case agent and his supervisor.
That's right. Boots on the infantry, man. No question.
And that's what you got. I kind of look at here is you've got two guys that are experts. In fact, Andrew McCarthy, in his commentary the other day, even said, he said the U.S. attorneys always rely on them because they're the experts at the tax law. They're the experts of the crime.
Well, it's our system, John, the way we always bring in the administrator, the chief, the head of the friggin' 30,000 person agency that acts or gets questioned as if they know what's going on in the street, which we both know is a bunch of crap. Okay. It's just, I could use another word. It's just absolute effed up beyond all recognition. Football.
Yeah, well,
You know,
it's
it's crazy.
insane when and that's how you take the investigators out of the equation on the thing.
Right.
But the IRS is that their testimony was so powerful, and I'm just using that as an analogy here. The same analogy applies. You have a conspiracy case here. You have all the dots connect. You have all the information, but yet nobody's investigated it to put them together in the way that it should be. And again, I think I opened up on the first one explaining to the public. The public didn't stand a chance of ever understanding how this all comes together, because from day one, what happens? The big lie theory from the media, who was very complicit with the Obama administration and now the Biden administration to do what? Deceive the public for what? Keep them in power to finish their agenda. Very simple. This isn't rocket scientist stuff from this standpoint. And I'm just a fact gatherer. I don't have a dog in the fight here. I'm just gathering the facts using my experience level, putting together a complex conspiracy on how this information comes together, because the public deserves answers
Absolutely
to these questions.
Well, John, I'm going to take back your own discredit. No, you do have a dog in the fight. You're a professional. You spent a lifetime in pursuit of a professional career. So did I, and so did others. Okay. And you hold credentials. You have credentials like those two gentlemen I watched all those hearings, those two IRS agents. If those guys weren't as rock solid as you could possibly get, wasn't one of them a Democrat and the gentleman was gay? Am I right on that?
Yeah, but the media threw that out there that he was a Democrat and gay, like that had something to do.
John, I think he said it himself, if I'm not mistaken.
No, they brought that out. They had outed him ahead of time.
Oh, okay. I didn't catch.
So they wanted to again what's the best plan that these guys do is they accuse you of what they're doing, and they've got a name calling demean. So that brings us into segment
two. Source. Yeah, discredit the source.
Yeah, this brings us into the media's role in covering up the crime of the century. Okay. And this is important for the public to understand. The media has always been was in the Constitution. They were given that role in the outside the Constitution to be like the watchdog or whatever against governor tyranny, thinking that the media would always protect the citizenry against tyranny. Today, you've got a complete opposite, where the media now is the lapdog for the party in power to get their agenda. So we are going from a republic into areas no different than you have in Russia, that you have in closed societies like China, where the government dictates and telling the public, we're going to tell you what's true and what's not. And if you don't believe it, we're going to come after you. And that's where that's why people need to understand. And that's where I'm going to get into. Let's cover the big lie theory. And let's do a little history lesson here so the public understands this is not about Donald Trump at all. Right. Donald Trump just happens to be the focus, the guy on the swivel, but this could be any of us at any given time if they take total control. So that's my warning to the American public. Now, in saying that, let's do the history lesson. How did back in the 20s, you had the Great Depression in Europe, United States. You had a lot of people out of work, societies unraveling before everybody's eyes. And the question is how did you take a society like the German people, who were well educated, and get them to put a man in power like Adolf Hitler, into power, and give him the authority to use the color of authority of the state to do whatever he wanted to do. Okay? And so the German people, due to the Great Depression, Hitler gets into power. The American public needs to know this. He never was voted in with a majority of the public. He was put into power by an agreement between the elites and the manufacturers and a few of the parties, but he was never put in through democracy, through vote, or as chancellor. So it was one of those, okay, you're going to be the people that put him in power didn't realize the extent of how nefarious this guy was, because he flipped the script on them. Once he got power, he used that power, just like the Obama administration recognized the power of the National Security Division and unmasking. Hitler's using the power of the state to do what? Criminalize the citizens. What was the main theme of their disinformation program? That you had to be of German blood, you were a superior race, and we were going to build a 1,000-year Reich.
And John, beautiful history lesson. I really just keep it there, but I do remember doing some homework on this. Hitler told the German people, I will take care of you. I will build a car for all of you, and you'll all have food. And that's where the flip comes. And he gains their confidence. Boy, does that sound familiar to anybody today? Got a college loan? Does that sound familiar to anybody?
Great analogy, Brian.
Oh my.
Great analogy. So let's take it a step further.
Oh, yeah, mercy.
In order for Hitler to finish how nefarious is his hatred, he sold the idea that the Germans were the superior race and above all other races, and they must conquer the world. That was his theory. And that was the big lie that they put out, that you had to have German blood, and if you were German blood, you were going to be the kingmaker for the rest of the time, this 1,000-year Reich. Well, we saw how it lasted. But in order to get there, you had fractions within Germany at the time. You had the communist bloc, and you had the dissidents, and he had to get rid of those folks. Plus, he had to demonize. He had to make somebody where he could rally the nation against. He had to demonize somebody. And who did he demonize? He demonized the Jews. All the problems of the Depression, all the financial problems of Germany, everything that was bad in Germany was due to one factor, the Jews. So he focused all that. He got the power of the state. And we saw how the power of the state, how bad it is, because here you are, they get in charge and they commit the most heinous atrocities known to man. Okay? And that's a fact. And so you have to look at it today and say, from an American standpoint, well, that can't happen here. But ladies and gentlemen, it is happening here before your eyes. They're just using they're taking the same tactics of the big lie theory, okay, to accuse your enemies. What you're doing, use the power of state to criminalize them, to go after them, and that way you take care of your political opposition, you consolidate your power, and you put your agenda in. And that is where we are at today. So when you look at the big lie theory on the media's role, one of the areas that was never addressed by Mueller in his special counsel or Durham or the Inspector General role was how President Obama's role in creating or promoting the federal bureaucracy within federal employees within their bureaucracy before he left to do what? To resist Trump policies and to destroy his presidency as part of what? The crime of the century. So what happens from that standpoint? Well, if you start looking at at how they were doing this, they used the same strategy, okay, of demonizing Trump as Hitler. Now they're demonizing the Republican Party, the MAGA movement, or anybody that has to do with Trump is Hitler. He's the devil. He's committed all these crimes, the target of their hatred. So you have to ask yourself the question, how did in 2000, after Mueller did his thing and everything, how did 55% of the country believe that Trump was an illegitimate president and that Trump had colluded with the Russians, when we now know that was all manufactured garbage?
No, it's a fact out. Hey, John, let me, on that note right there, didn't Mr. Biden, I say that tongue in cheek, didn't President Biden make a speech, was it September of last year or the year before, claiming about MAGA and those types are a threat to national security? Didn't he make us? Didn't he give
Yes, he stood up in front of the country, I believe, in that where he had the 2 Marine guards and it was like it was really kind of like a evil. The only thing missing was a vapor cloud. I mean, it was one of those deals where you're looking. Yeah, it was kind of crazy. And also,
didn't the one more thing, John? Didn't the Germans take your children, the German children, and put them in camps to train them up for the patriotism of the young age?
The Germans went to the extent of encouraging pregnantization by Germans only, selected Germans with German women. They took the babies, they put them in camps. Remember, the Germans were able before they started World War II, for 8 years, they were able to take 8 years of kids and indoctrinate them. So when you get into why were the Nazis so fanatical, you've got your point. It's just like today. What's happening here today? You can use the same analogy, Brian. Universities.
Your college, man.
Right there. They're getting indoctrinated, brainwashed. What are they talking about Trump? Trump's Hitler. Trump's done all these terrible things. The Republicans are racist. The country's systemically racist. And remember what Biden put out on his first week. The country is systemically racist, and the biggest threat to the country is white supremacy. That is the biggest lie ever told, period, because there's no stats that back any of that garbage up. So here's my question to the public. When you talk to somebody and you talk to them and they say, I don't like Trump, and that's fine. You don't have to like Trump as a person. Doesn't matter from that standpoint. But it's when they start talking that he's a crook, I hate him. Ask why do you hate him and why is he a crook? Give me an example. And all you can get back, the answers you ever get back from these people is that you're a racist. They'll shut the conversation down or try to shut it down. Okay. Or 2, I don't know. Or they'll repeat the parroting of what the media has saturated. The talking points verbatim that you see every day that comes out of the media. Every day, one news thing starts at this end, by the end of the day, it gets at the other end. So it goes from this outlet to that outlet, the same talking points. White supremacy is the #1 threat. All big lie theories. So what does that do for the public? Well, the poor public, people working, doing their lives, trying to live, they're not involved in this stuff. They don't pay any attention to any of this stuff. And I don't blame them. They're trying to make a living. They're trying to live their lives, whatever, not paying a lot of attention. This is all inside baseball between insiders in DC and political types. However, when they get home and they turn on the news, and the news they watch is the same media repeating the same parroting talking points, but they get bombarded by this stuff. They don't take the time to do their homework because they want to trust the government. They want to trust the FBI. They want to trust the DOJ. And that's where we're at, ladies and gentlemen, today. You can't trust any of these people because they've been lying to you for over the last amount of years on this stuff. So looking at that from that standpoint, when you start walking down the information on when did they do it. If you timeline all this out, and I did it in one of my last Substack on the media on this part, and I timelined like 4 months from the day Trump got elected up until March of 2017. And in there, you will see all the different reporting from all the different reporting outlets describing how people inside the government are resisting, how people inside the government are putting together these communication chains so they can discuss how to stop policies. And so when you start seeing stuff like that, you got to ask questions. And there were only three media reports, one by Paul Sperry when he worked, he did a commentary for the New York Post. He did a piece in February 11th of 2017, and he wrote on his opinion piece how the Obama administration is scheming to sabotage the Trump presidency. And he describes how they're going to do it through this, one of Obama's campaign units called OFA, and how it's going to be financed and everything else. So you've got a kind of like an organization that's already going to be starting, set up by the President of the United States to do what? To go after and stop policies within the Trump administration. You have reports on this one from the Washington Beacon, this Adam Cato guy. And in there, he talks about sources have told him former Obama campaign officials waging a secret campaign to oust General Flynn. And they named the three Obama former officials that were involved. I think they named Ben Rose and two others that were part of this crew. And it was told to Credo by one of his sources inside the intelligence community. Then you have an article on February 17, 2017, Obama holdovers shadow government. Now they're reporting that this is going to be an organized or semi-organized effort. Then you go down the list and you start looking at all the reports from all the different CBS News, the Washington Post. The Washington Post puts out an article on January 17th, which kind of really capitalizes this whole thing. Not more than a couple minutes after Trump's been sworn in as president of the United States, they published the first headlines in an article, "The campaign to impeach Trump has begun." Says it all, ladies and gentlemen. They capitalize the whole thing. If you go to the Substack, you will see that they interview officials within the government and out of the government that were former officials of Trump that admit that they obstructed or there. You have Ellis Farkas, who did an interview on MSNBC where she admitted that she did. You've got another lady that worked for the Defense Department that admitted that she did. You have all these reports in an article in Vanity Fair, 2 articles in depth, talking about all the employees and all these different federal bureaucracies within the federal government, how all these people are concerned about the Obama legacy and how they're going to disrupt the Trump presidency. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we can have political discourse.
Of course.
We really can. You don't have to like whoever got elected. You don't have to support him. However, when you use your federal job, you take an oath, you get hired on, and especially if you're a law enforcement officer and you're going to use that to violate the law, that's a crime.
Okay.
And if you're going to promote people to resist, remember the FBI agent Klein Smith. What was his famous saying when his interview with the Inspector General? Viva la resistance. And what was Peter Strzok's famous interview when he was interviewed, I believe, by MSNBC? A few years from now, we're going to be looked at as patriots.
Jesus.
Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. Patriots.
It's incredible.
So you have to put
Snowden a patriot? That's a no one. Yeah.
So you have to.
You're correct.
You have to put it in that context. So let me wrap this up.
Wrap it up now, you know, like,
That, again, what was the modus operandi that they used? And they use to this day, the unmasking of American citizens to spy on them for political purposes. 2 days ago, you had a FISA court judge chastise the FBI, and it was reported, where one of the FBI intel analysts queried 4 names, a U.S. senator and a state senator, 4 times. So they're still, and Ray was just in front of the congressional committee saying that they've taken care of all these unmasking procedure problems. Well, they're not procedure problems, as you can see. The violations still go on.
Mm-hmm.
People's rights are being violated under the auspices of using the Foreign Intelligence Patriot Act and using foreign intelligence collection as the rouge for political purposes. To do what? To damage your political opponents. And Trump's a perfect case. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I'll wrap this segment up. Next week, we're going to get into the fusion GPS, Glenn Simpson's guilt by association theory, how it was criminalized. We're going to talk about the Steele dossier, and we're going to start getting into the meats and origins of how this whole base starts. So that's for next week.
Okay, outstanding. Audience, I tell you what, the facts from the inside that John has mastered. And John, I am just duly impressed. It's just unbelievable. I would have worked with you anywhere, anytime, but you are one hell of a, actually, you've been critiquing my way I cross my T's and I's, man. You're something else, but it's just an unbelievable amount of information. A couple of things I want to say, just real quick. I'm going to wrap this right up. We're talking about the comparison in Nazi Germany. You know what they didn't have? They didn't have this. They didn't have the tech. And I can't, now they had the corporate because they built the car for everyone, the Volkswagen, right? And other things. They didn't have this right here. And let's face it, we all know today, these people are running the show. They're in the White House. We all know that. That's a fact. That's not me saying that. That's not John saying that. And I told John right before we came on tonight, I took one of John's Substacks. Everybody know what Chat GPT-4 is? Well, I just happen to be in a position where I'm testing these things, interesting enough. And I put John's, one of his Substacks, and how many followers you have, 5,000?
I've got, I wish I had 5,000.
Okay. You got a lot?
I got probably a couple hundred.
Okay. Well,
but I've had over 5,000 read my stuff.
It's out there. Okay, it's out there. So I put in one of his articles, right? You see all my little tags and post-its on it? And my chat comes back and says, I have no knowledge of that. And it might not be important enough. Something along those lines. When I can put in here, the timing order of my small block Chevy 69 Camaro 350. And I have to give a shout out to gentlemen out there, Andy Frisella, who I just kind of learned about lately. And he's been out there a long time. And Andy, you are getting after it, brother, along with others. Mike Glover, Pat Mack, Jocko Willowlink, all you guys. Joe Rogan, where are you? You need to put this man on. We'll be glad to you fly us to your show. We'll be glad to come out there. And but this is what people need to hear. This is what the audience needs to hear. Please, people, take heed. We're going to do more. And every week it's like going to school. So just kick back, get your adult beverage or your milk or your soy or you're a veggie or whatever the hell you are, and just listen, because everything that John is talking about is fully documented. And don't forget, I have to talk John's book. Don't forget John's book. And John, that was published in 2018?
16,
excuse me. Ideology and Political Correctness of Trump Reality. Outstanding. About the narco-terrorism and corruption fight and war in Afghanistan. Well, John, with that, thank you very much. We did a pretty good job. We had a little technical glitch in the beginning. But to my audience, anything else, John?
That's it.
Peace. Love to everybody. Until proven otherwise, always have strength. Not a bad combination to have. Take care.
Thanks, Brian.
Take care.